5 years. 5 long, suffocating years. That's how long I spent behind bars for a crime I didn't commit. When I finally walked out of that prison, I had a plan. A plan to rebuild my life, reclaim my business, and maybe, just maybe, reconnect with the family I lost. But when I stepped through the door of the $2 million house I built with my own hands, I didn't find the life I'd left behind. No, I found something worse. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. My ex-wife, Sarah, sitting on the couch like she owned it, her arms folded, her face cold, like she hadn't just lost the man she once claimed to love. And standing next to her, as if he had every right to be there, Craig, my former business partner, the man who used to be my closest ally, the man who framed me, who took everything from me, and now he was living in my house. I stood there for a moment, frozen, as the weight of what I was seeing hit me. The room felt like it was closing in. This was my house, my father's legacy, and yet there they were, Sarah with her arms crossed, like she was trying to hold herself together. Craig standing by the fireplace, his eyes watching me with that damn smug look I used to trust. "You're back early," Craig said, his voice oozing with that familiar arrogance. He didn't even flinch as I stood there, stunned, like everything was normal, like I was the problem for showing up to reclaim what was mine. Sarah didn't move. She didn't even speak at first. She just stared at me, the same cold look I'd seen in her eyes when she finally decided to leave. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. "Why the hell are you two here?" My voice came out like a growl, thick with anger and confusion, but they just stood there like they were waiting for me to do something, anything. "Jerry, we need to talk." Sarah finally spoke, her voice distant, colder than I'd ever heard it before. "Talk?" I echoed. My head was spinning. "What do you mean, talk? 5 years, and now you want to talk?" Craig stepped forward, the same smug expression on his face. "It's a long story," he said, looking at Sarah like they shared some secret. I could see it now. There was something else going on, something they weren't telling me. I looked around the room, trying to steady my breathing, trying to get control of the situation. The walls, the furniture, the same old photos, all of it was just wrong now. This house, my house, was no longer mine, not in the way it once was. My life had been stolen from me, piece by piece, and here it was, right in front of me. My hands started to shake as I noticed the papers on the coffee table. Documents. Legal papers. Some were covered in what looked like a settlement agreement. I reached for them without thinking, ripping them from the table. "Settlement?" I muttered under my breath, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. My mind was already racing, trying to make sense of it all. What kind of settlement? Before they could say a word, I scanned through the documents. The betrayal, the lies, it was all right there. They sold my life. They sold my future. Craig Sipp's voice broke through my thoughts. "Don't Sips get ahead of yourself, Jerry. The settlement Sips between you, Sarah, and me. Your little thick Sips worked out in our favor." That word, incident. He used it like it was nothing. Like 5 years of my life, lost to his scheme, was just a small incident. A glitch in the system. I looked up, my anger bubbling up like a cauldron about to boil over. You set me up." I spat, my voice low but full of venom. Sarah Sipp's face twisted with guilt, but she quickly masked it. She stood up slowly, trying to appear calm, but I could see the nervousness in her eyes. "Jerry, it Sips not like that." "No, it sets exactly like that." I shot back, cutting her off. "You let him take everything. You helped him steal my business, my name. You made sure I stayed locked away while you two waltzed around in my life." Craig leaned in, his grin widening as he saw my temper flare. "I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine. You were never going to come back, Jerry. I knew it, so I made sure we had a future, a real future, not some prison sentence." The words hit me like a fist to the gut. A future? This was my future. It was my father's legacy. And now it was in their hands. I took a deep breath. I couldn't let them see me break. Not now. I dropped the papers back on the table with a loud thud. You think you can just take everything from me and get away with it? Sarah Sips's face paled. She looked away. Craig didn't step back down. It steps over Jerry, he said, his voice almost pitying. You should have stayed gone. The room felt colder now. The silence between us was thick, heavy with the weight of everything they'd done. I looked around one last time, trying to steady my thoughts. But all I could think was this. I wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. Not after everything. I turned and walked toward the door, my mind racing, my heart pounding in my chest. But before I stepped outside, I turned back. I'm not done with you. Not by a long shot. I stepped out of the house into the cool autumn air. The world around me felt different now, dark. But it was time to get my life back, and I'd make sure they paid for what they did to me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. I couldn't sleep. The weight of it all, everything that happened over the last few hours, had my mind spinning. 5 years I'd spent in that hellhole fighting to keep my sanity, to hold on to some shred of hope that when I got out I'd be able to put my life back together. But this was worse than I could have imagined. I had known betrayal, of course. That was a given, but never like this. Not from Sarah, not from Craig. I sat on the edge of my bed, the darkness of my bedroom swallowing me whole. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, the autumn chill creeping in, but inside I felt something much colder. The house I once loved, the place I built with my hands, the place where my children grew up, was now nothing but a hollow shell filled with the ghosts of what could have been. I grabbed the bottle of whiskey I'd kept hidden in the back of my closet, a relic from the days when I would sit in the workshop after a long day's work, sipping and thinking about the future. But tonight, it was just another tool to numb the pain. I poured the dark amber liquid into a glass and swirled it. The ice clinked against the glass like a haunting reminder of all the things I couldn't change. I took a deep gulp, feeling the burn slide down my throat, but it didn't help. Nothing did. I looked around the room again. It was hard to focus. My eyes kept drifting to the framed photographs on the wall. My family, my children, the life I used to have. They seemed like distant memories now, flickering like shadows in the corner of my mind. I grabbed one photo, a picture of Sarah and me from our honeymoon. We were so young back then, so full of hope. I stared at it, the cracks in my heart growing deeper with every passing second. How could she do this? She used to tell me how much she loved me, how much she cared, but now she was living with him. Craig, the man who had torn my life apart, the man who framed me for a crime I didn't commit. I smashed the glass onto the nightstand. The sound was sharp, cutting through the silence of the room. I wanted to scream, to break something, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I sat there staring at the shards of glass on the floor. They reflected the dim light from the bedside lamp, but they couldn't hide the truth of how far gone everything was. I lost everything. My reputation, my family, my business, all because of Craig's greed. And now Sarah was right there beside him. She had fallen for his lies, or maybe she was always with him, even when we were still married. I didn't know anymore. The guilt gnawed at me. I should have seen it coming. How could I not have? All the signs were there. The late nights at the office, the weird exchanges between them. But I never wanted to believe it. I never wanted to think that the woman I loved, the mother of my children, could betray me like this. But I was a fool. A damn fool. I took another drink, the burn grounding me in the present. But the anger, it was still there, simmering just beneath the surface. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't just move on. Not after everything they had taken from me. I had to fight. Not just for the business. Not just for my house. But for the life that was stolen from me. But where the hell was I supposed to start? I leaned back against the headboard and closed my eyes. For a moment I thought I could hear the hum of the workshop, the sound of the old engines running, but it was gone. The workshop was empty now, a reminder of what once was. And then, like a flash of lightning, a thought struck me, something I should have thought of earlier. I reached for my phone. My fingers shook as I typed the name I hadn't thought of in years, Ben Williams. Ben was a private investigator I'd hired years ago, back when I was still trying to prove my innocence. He was good, real good. A guy who knew how to dig through paperwork, how to find the things people thought they could bury. I didn't know if he'd still be available, but I had to try. I dialed the number and held the phone to my ear, the seconds stretching into eternity. Finally, a gravelly voice answered. Ben Williams. Ben, I said, my voice hoarse. It says Jerry. I need your help. There was a pause on the other end. Then a sharp inhale. Jerry? I thought you were still... I was, I interrupted. But I stepped him back now. And I need you to dig into Craig Septa's finances. I need everything you can find on him. There's Septa's something wrong, Ben. Something big. Ben was quiet for a moment, but then he spoke again, his voice lower now. All right, Jerry. I said a look into it, but you know the price. You sir gonna owe me big for this one. I didn't care about the cost anymore. Not when it meant taking back what was rightfully mine. I still pay, I said. Just find the truth. I don't care what it costs. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall, the weight of everything pressed down on me again. But now, there was a plan. I was done drowning in self-pity, done wallowing in my grief. I was going to make them pay. And it would start with the truth. The truth about everything Craig had done to steal my life. And once I had it, I would expose him for the fraud he was. Before I could fully process everything, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Michael, my older brother. You coming by tomorrow? I smiled bitterly as I typed back. So'll be there. I wasn't just going to win back what was mine. I was going to take everything from them, piece by piece. And I wasn't going to stop until they felt the weight of their betrayal. This was just the beginning. I woke up with a headache. Not the kind from drinking, though I had my fair share the night before. No, this was different. This was the kind of headache you get when you're realizing that your whole life has just been flipped upside down. But it wasn't just the shock of everything that had happened. It was the realization that if I was going to get my life back, I needed a plan, and not just any plan. One that was as methodical and calculated as the restorations I used to do on those classic cars. I knew exactly where to start. The money, it always came down to the money, didn't it? It was the motive, the driving force behind Craig's betrayal. He didn't just want my house. He wanted control of my legacy, my business. And to do that, he had manipulated the books, funneled money, and probably even hidden assets I didn't know about. I grabbed the paperwork that had been left on the coffee table last night, the settlement agreement and other legal papers, and spread them out on the kitchen counter. Every number, every signature was a piece of the puzzle, and I wasn't going to let it slip away from me. Not this time. But I needed more, a lot more. I stared at the papers, trying to make sense of them. I'd already contacted Ben, the private investigator, and I knew he'd be working on digging into Craig's finances. I trusted him. He was thorough. If anyone could uncover the skeletons in Craig's closet, it was Ben. As I waited for Ben to get back to me, I needed to cover my tracks. Craig might not know it yet, but I was already a step ahead. I was going to take back what was mine, piece by piece, and it was time to put the first part of my plan into action. The workshop was the heart of my business. Without it, I was nothing. Craig might have taken control of everything, but he didn't have the heart of the operation. That was still mine. I drove out to the workshop the next morning, my mind racing with the details. It was just me now. The crew was long gone, sold off, replaced by people Craig could manipulate. But Henry was still there. The old family mechanic, the one person I knew I could trust. I parked in front of the workshop, the smell of oil and rust filling the air like an old familiar memory. The place was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear the wind rustling through the trees, but other than that there was nothing. No sound of tools, no hum of machines, no voices of men working. It was almost as if the place had been abandoned. I walked inside, and Henry was standing by the workbench, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked up when he saw me, his face lighting up in a mixture of surprise and relief. "Jerry," he said, his voice hoarse, "I didn't think I see you back here. I didn't think I be back either." I said, the bitterness creeping into my voice. But here I am. I need your help, Henry. He stepped forward, wiping his hands again, this time on his pants. Anything, you know that. I glanced around the workshop, the place where I'd spent so many years restoring cars, putting my soul into each one. The tools were still there, the machines, the old cars parked in various stages of restoration. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a ghost town. I need you to help me get the records. The old ones, I said, looking him square in the eye. The ones Craig doesn't know about. The ones he thought were buried. Henry nodded without hesitation. He knew what I was talking about. The records that showed the real value of the business. The ones that would expose Craig for the thief he was. "We've got a few stashed in the back office," Henry said, his voice dropping lower as he led me toward the back of the workshop. When Craig started taking over, he was moving everything around, changing things up. I knew something was off, but I didn't want to get involved. Not until now. I followed him to the small office at the back of the shop. The door creaked open and the smell of dust and old paper hit me. It looked like nothing had changed since I left. Stacks of papers, old invoices, and files were piled on the desk, just like they used to be. It was almost comforting, in a way, like some part of me was still here. Henry pulled out a few files from one of the drawers and handed them to me. "Here, these are the ones Craig didn't know about. Some old contracts, invoices from the early days when your father was still running the shop. They might not be everything you need, but it sets a start." I flipped through the papers, my eyes scanning the familiar handwriting, the signatures that tied my family to the business. This was it. This was what I needed to take back control. I shoved the papers into my bag and turned to Henry. "Thanks, man. I need more than this, but this is a good start." "You've got it, Jerry," he said, his voice firm. "Just say the word, and I said I'll help you get whatever you need." I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd had in days. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone. I wasn't just fighting for revenge. I was fighting for my family's legacy, and with Henry on my side, I knew I had a fighting chance. I left the workshop and drove back home, the weight of the plan starting to settle in, but I wasn't ready to celebrate yet. This was just the beginning. There was still a long way to go. As I walked into the house, I grabbed my phone. I hadn't heard back from Ben yet, but that was okay. I knew he was working on it. I started scrolling through the legal documents again, trying to make sense of them. Craig's name was all over the place. Signatures, transactions, everything leading back to him. But I needed more. I needed something concrete, something that would destroy him. I glanced over at the window, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor. I couldn't help but smile to myself. This was it. The first part of my plan had been set in motion, and soon Craig would realize just how far I was willing to go to get everything back. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and the kind of silence that only comes when you're working towards something big. Ben had called me back. He'd already started digging into Craig's finances, and from what he'd found, it was just as I'd suspected. Craig had been playing the game dirty for a long time, but I needed more. I needed the smoking gun that would break his empire wide open. I spent hours in the workshop, poring over every file Henry had handed me, cross-referencing invoices, contracts, and bank statements. The more I dug, the more the pieces started to fall into place. Craig had been moving money around like a pro, using shady methods to hide his theft. There were transactions that didn't add up, bank slips that seemed to have disappeared from official records, but I knew if I could find those missing pieces, I could bring him down. One thing was clear: Craig had underestimated me. As I sat there staring at the cluttered desk in the workshop, my mind was already working on the next step. I couldn't just walk into court with a pile of paperwork and hope for the best. No, I had to be strategic. I had to build my case piece by piece, each move carefully calculated. I needed to get into Craig's bank accounts, trace every penny he'd stolen from me and my family. But how? He was a smart guy. He knew how to cover his tracks. I couldn't just walk up to the bank and ask for his records. I needed someone on the inside. And that's when it hit me. Michael's. I hadn't talked to Michael, my older brother, in weeks. I knew he'd been keeping to himself since I got out, probably struggling with the same anger I was feeling. But Michael knew people. He had connections, and I needed him. I dialed his number, the phone buzzing in my ear. The seconds felt like hours before he picked up. Jerry? His voice was rough, like he'd been awake for days. Yeah, it suds me, I said, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I need a favor. I need you to get me into Craig South's accounts. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Michael spoke, his voice heavy with skepticism. You want me to what? I need to track his money. His real money. I know he sips hiding it, Michael. I need you to find a way to get me that information. I don't know, Jerry. That sip's dangerous. Craig Sip's no fool. If you get caught, I want to get caught, I said, cutting him off. We shall be careful, but if you want to help me get everything back, then this is what we need to do. He was quiet again, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice. Michael had always been the cautious one, the one who played by the rules. He wasn't like me. I was willing to break the rules if it meant getting what was mine. I still think about it, he said finally. But you start asking for a lot, Jerry. A lot more than just a few documents. I know, I replied, but I said not going to stop until I take back everything Craig stole from me. We hung up, and I stared at the phone, my fingers tapping against the desk as I thought about my next move. If Michael came through, it would be a game changer, but I wasn't going to wait around for him. I needed to get more evidence on Craig, something he couldn't deny. I picked up my phone again, this time dialing Ben's number. Ben, it sets Jerry, I said when he picked up. I need you to do a deeper dive. Find out if there's sets any hidden property. Anything Craig Set's been buying or investing in that doesn't match up with what he Set's claiming. I asked, imp on it. Ben said without hesitation, I shall get back to you in a few days. I shall've already got some leads on a few of his transactions. I shall dig deeper. Good. And Ben? Make sure this stays quiet. I don't just want Craig catching wind of what we are doing. Understood. I shall keep it tight. I hung up feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. Every step I took brought me closer to uncovering the truth. The next morning, I went to the local courthouse. I needed a copy of the settlement agreement that had been filed between Sarah, Craig, and me while I was in prison. I had to find out exactly what they had stolen from me, what they thought they could get away with. I knew Sarah had signed it, but I needed to see Craig's name on the dotted line, to see the real proof that they were in this together. As I walked into the courthouse, I was greeted by the familiar smell of old wood and dusty files. It was a place I hadn't been in years, and yet it felt like home. It was where I'd spent so many hours working on contracts, handling the legal side of the business. It used to be second nature to me. Now it felt like another battlefield. I approached the counter and asked for the records. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with glasses perched on the tip of her nose, gave me a cursory glance before pulling out the files. It'll take a few minutes, she said. You can wait over there. I nodded, sitting down at one of the chairs in the waiting area. My fingers drummed against the armrest as I watched the clock tick away. Every minute felt like an hour. But finally the clerk returned, handing me the files with a quiet smile. I took the papers, my hands trembling slightly as I opened them, and there it was. Craig's name, bold and unmistakable. They had signed it. They had stolen my life, and they had thought they could get away with it. But they hadn't yet counted on me. I walked out of the courthouse, the settlement papers clutched tightly in my hand. This was the first piece of the puzzle. I wasn't done yet, but I was getting closer. Every move I made brought me closer to exposing the truth, and when it was all said and done, Craig would pay for everything he'd taken from me. I sat at my desk, the weight of the documents in front of me feeling like a heavy anchor in the stillness of the room. The house felt empty, just like it had every day since I got back. I could still hear the echoes of my past life, the sound of laughter, the hum of machinery, the voices of my family and employees, but now everything was quiet. The silence was almost suffocating. I flipped through the papers again, scanning the transaction records Ben had sent me. Craig had covered his tracks well. He'd moved money between shell companies, hid assets under different names, and made sure nothing was traceable unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. but I knew how to follow the money. I had spent my entire life working with numbers, and I was damn good at it. My phone buzzed. I grabbed it, expecting it to be Ben or Michael, but it was a message from Sarah. I know you stir upset, but this isn't SEPTA the way to handle things. You stir only making it worse for everyone. I scoffed and tossed the phone on the table. Everyone. She had the audacity to call it everyone, as if she wasn't one of the people responsible for tearing my life apart, as if she hadn't walked away from me and straight into Craig's arms. But I wasn't done with her either, not by a long shot. She would pay for her betrayal just as much as Craig would. I got up from the desk and walked over to the workbench. My mind raced with plans, calculating each move with precision. The business, the assets, the money. It was all mine, and I would take it back, piece by piece. I just needed to keep going, stay focused. The doorbell rang, breaking my thoughts. I checked the time, 11:45 a.m., too early for any of the usual visitors. I walked to the door and opened it to find Michael standing there, looking as grim as ever. "Jerry," he said, his voice rough. "I sep got what you need." He handed me a folder, thick with documents. I took it from him without saying anything, my heart pounding in my chest. Michael's silence only added to the tension. He didn't want to be here. I could feel it in the air, but I needed him. "You sure about this?" I asked, flipping through the folder. This could blow up in both our faces. Michael didn't meet my eyes. "You stumped my brother, and stumped doing this because you stumped right. Craig Sepp's been using you, using us all, but I don't want any part of it once this is over." I paused, letting his words sink in. Michael was right. This was bigger than any of us. Craig had manipulated everything, our family, the business, the trust. But I wasn't going to let him win. "You've got the names?" I asked, still flipping through the papers. I stopped on one page, my eyes narrowing. There it was, Craig's bank account number. And next to it, an address I recognized from an old property listing. "That Sepp's the last piece of the puzzle," Michael said. "I Sepp been digging through some of Craig Sepp's old investments. Sepp's been trying to hide something, but it's Sepp's all in here." I grinned, feeling the satisfaction of the first real victory in what felt like an eternity. This is it. This is where it all comes crashing down for him. Michael shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting toward the door. "Just be careful. You as Sif got your revenge. But don't sit lose yourself in it, Jerry. I can sit lose you too." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Michael wasn't wrong. I was consumed by the thought of what they'd done to me, to my family. But as I stood there staring at the papers, a part of me realized that he was right. I was about to get everything back. Everything. But the question was, what would be left of me once I did? Michael stepped out of the house, leaving me alone with the paperwork. I felt the weight of what I was about to do settling in my chest. Craig's empire was built on lies, on greed, and on manipulating people like me. But it wouldn't last. Not once I exposed the truth. I walked back to the desk and grabbed the phone again. This time I dialed Ben's number. "Ben," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I need you to do one more thing. I've got a property listing for Craig. I need you to get everything on it. Ownership, value, any debts, anything that said'll tie it back to him." "Sep I'm on it, Jerry," Ben replied, his voice sharp. "I Sep'll get back to you in a few hours." I hung up and sat back, staring at the folder in front of me. The pieces were all coming together. I could feel it. This was my moment. I spent the next few hours gathering everything I had. The documents, the bank slips, the hidden assets. I was going to move quickly. Once Ben came through with the property details, I would file the lawsuit. I would freeze Craig's assets, take control of the business, and expose everything for the world to see. It was almost too easy. Craig had underestimated me. I grabbed my keys and walked to the car, my mind already racing toward the next step. There was no turning back now. I wasn't just going to get back what was mine. I was going to burn everything Craig had built to the ground. When I reached the courthouse, I went straight to the records department. I was in and out in minutes, the documents I needed in hand. By the time I got back to the house, the phone rang. "Ben." It sets all here, Jerry, he said. Everything you need, the property, the bank accounts, the whole damn thing. Craig Sepp's been hiding this from you for years. I smiled. Let Sitz get started. It was time. Time for Craig Sepp's empire to fall. I couldn't stop the storm inside me. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how deep Craig's betrayal ran. Every piece of evidence I found only pushed me further into the abyss, deeper into the desire for justice, for revenge. The silence in the house was deafening. Sarah hadn't been around much lately, only sending occasional half-hearted messages. Craig, on the other hand, was still playing his game, trying to keep up appearances, acting like nothing had changed. But I could see the cracks starting to form. He didn't know it yet, but his empire was already crumbling. The financial records Ben had uncovered, the hidden property, the bank accounts, it was all there. Each revelation felt like a jolt of electricity through my veins. Every secret, every lie was another piece of the puzzle that would bring Craig down. I sat at the kitchen table, my fingers tracing the documents in front of me. I couldn't focus. Every page was a reminder of what they'd stolen from me. My business, my home, my life. It was all right there, in black and white, and soon it would all come crashing down. But something wasn't sitting right with me. As much as I had planned, as much as I had prepared, I couldn't shake the feeling that Craig was one step ahead. He was smarter than I gave him credit for. He had always been a smooth operator, and even now there was a sense of control about him. It was like he knew I was coming for him, but he wasn't worried. That's what bothered me the most. I grabbed my phone and dialed Ben's number. He'd been working around the clock to dig up everything he could on Craig, but something still felt off. Ben, I need to know more, I said, when he picked up. I need to know exactly what Craig has been doing with all of his assets. He sits hiding something. I can feel it. Svev already sent you everything I found, Jerry, Ben replied, his voice weary but determined. It Sepp's all in those files. Sepp's been laundering money, moving assets around, but there's Sepp's nothing I can find that links him directly to anything illegal. Yet, I clenched my jaw, frustration building. Yet, that Sepp's the problem, Ben. There's Sepp's nothing concrete. His Sepp's too clean. We need more. I know Sepp's hiding something big. I can feel it. Ben was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. There's something else. A property. A house, Jerry. It's in Craig's name, but it doesn't show up on any of the official records. It's off the grid, hidden. I've been trying to track it down, but the paperwork's all screwed up. If it's what I think it is, it could be the key. My heart skipped a beat. Where is it? Ben gave me the address. I scribbled it down, my mind already racing. This was it. This was the smoking gun I'd been looking for. And I'm going to check it out, I said, already standing up and grabbing my keys. I said I'll need to act fast. If Sepp's hiding something there, we need to expose it before he moves everything. Be careful, Jerry, Ben warned. Craig Sepp's not an idiot. If you get too close... I know the risks, I interrupted, not needing to hear any more. Sepp not backing down now. I hung up and headed out the door, my thoughts focused entirely on the address Ben had given me. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I drove, the engine's hum the only sound breaking the heavy silence. I knew this wasn't just about money anymore, it was about my legacy. My future. Craig had taken everything from me, but he hadn't won yet, not until I said he had. The address led me to a quiet, secluded neighborhood on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place that you could easily overlook if you didn't know what you were looking for. The houses were large, well-maintained, with perfectly manicured lawns, but they all looked the same, bland, forgettable. Nothing about them screamed money. I pulled into the driveway of the property Ben had identified. The house looked abandoned, shutters hanging loosely, the lawn unkempt. It was almost as if someone had tried to make it blend in, tried to erase it from sight. I parked my car a few houses down, not wanting to draw attention to myself. My heart pounded in my chest as I surveyed the place. This was the one. I could feel it. Whatever Craig was hiding here, I was about to find it. I approached the house cautiously, my footsteps muffled by the overgrown grass. I tried the front door first, but it was locked. No surprise there. Craig wasn't stupid, but I'd come too far to back out now. I walked around to the back of the house, peering through the cracked windows. The interior was dark, the curtains drawn tightly. I could barely make out any details, but something felt off. I found a small side gate that led to the backyard. It was barely visible, hidden behind a few bushes. The gate creaked as I pushed it open, stepping into the overgrown yard. My eyes scanned the area, and that's when I saw it, a small shed tucked in the corner of the yard, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I approached the shed cautiously, my heart racing. This was it. This was where Craig had been hiding something. I could feel it in my gut. I reached for the door handle and turned it. It was unlocked. I stepped inside, my breath catching as I looked around. There were boxes, old furniture, and a few piles of what looked like scrap metal. But at the back of the shed, under a tarp, something gleamed in the dim light. I pulled the tarp back, revealing an old, dusty chest. It was locked. I smiled to myself. If Craig thought this was going to stay hidden, he had another thing coming. I had what I needed. The last piece of the puzzle. I stood in front of the shed, my mind racing. Every muscle in my body was taut with anticipation. I'd been close to the truth for so long, and now it was finally within my grasp. Craig had tried to bury it. He thought this would remain hidden forever. But here I was, standing on the precipice of his downfall. I took a deep breath and reached into my bag. I didn't have a key for the chest, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. I had tools and I knew how to use them. The lock clicked as I twisted the small wrench, the sound of the metal grinding against the lock echoing through the otherwise silent backyard. With one final turn, the chest opened. Inside, it was exactly what I expected: papers, contracts, bank slips, and right at the bottom, a thick envelope marked with a red wax seal. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out, the weight of what I was holding almost too much to bear. This was it. This was the evidence that would expose everything Craig had done, everything he'd stolen, and everything I was about to take back. I tore open the envelope, my eyes scanning the documents. Each page was more damning than the last. Bank transfers from hidden accounts, shady business deals, and an unsigned agreement between Craig and a handful of shady investors. They were all in this together. Sarah, Craig, and anyone else who thought they could steal my future from me. I was shaking now, not from fear, but from adrenaline. The plan was coming together, piece by piece. Craig had thought he was untouchable. He thought he'd won, but he hadn't counted on me. I stuffed the papers back into my bag, making sure no one could see what I had. As I turned to leave the shed, a sudden noise froze me in my tracks. Footsteps. Someone was coming. My heart pounded in my chest as I ducked behind the shed, peering around the corner. It was Craig. He was walking toward the house, his hands in his pockets, his face set in that same smug expression he always wore. I couldn't let him see me. Not yet. I backed away slowly, my breath shallow, trying to stay as quiet as possible. I couldn't let him know I was on to him. I needed to get out of here and back to my car before he figured out what I'd found. But just as I turned to make my exit, I heard him call out, "Jerry, I know you supper out here." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. How did he know? Had he been watching me? My mind raced as I considered my options. I couldn't go back to the house. Not with what I had. If he found out, it was over. I had no choice. I had to confront him. I stepped out from behind the shed, my hands clenched into fists. Craig didn't even flinch when he saw me. He just stood there, his eyes narrowing as he took in my bag, the papers inside it still fresh in my mind. "Still playing the victim, Jerry?" he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You always been so predictable. Thought you could come snooping around here like nothing Sep's changed." I didn't say anything at first. I didn't have to. The evidence was in my hand. I had everything I needed to take him down. "You don't know anything about what Delish really going on," Craig continued, stepping closer. "You think Yuseb figured it all out, but Yuseb just a man who Seb's been out of the game too long. Yuseb got nothing on me." I took a step forward, my voice low but steady. "Yuseb been hiding behind lies for years, Craig. But it ends today. Yuseb been stealing from me. From my family, you Sepp destroyed everything we built. Craig's expression hardened, but I could see the panic in his eyes. I knew I had him. He had underestimated me. I could feel the shift in the air. The game was over. I've got the proof, Craig, I said, my voice growing colder. I've got everything. The bank transfers, the hidden properties, the deals you thought would stay buried. You. His eyes flickered with something. Was it fear? No, Craig didn't fear anything. But I could see the anger building in him, the realization that his empire was about to crumble. You think you're the only one who can play dirty? He spat, his hands tightening into fists. You have no idea what you messing with. If you expose me yourself, your whole damn life will come crashing down. I held my ground. I wasn't sent backing down. I'm not the one who's since been hiding behind lies. I'm not the one who's since been stealing everything I since worked for. This is on you, Craig. You sense the one who's since going to pay. His gaze turned sharp, and for a brief moment I saw the man he used to be, the man I'd trusted. But it didn't matter anymore. That man was gone. The man standing in front of me was a liar, a thief, and a traitor. I turned and walked toward the gate, my bag heavy in my hand. I didn't need to say another word. I had already won. The evidence was in my possession, and Craig knew it. The noose was tightening, and there was no way out for him. As I got into my car, I could see him standing there, his figure framed by the shed, watching me. The realization hit him then. There was no escaping what was coming. He was going to lose everything. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. But I didn't care anymore. This was what I'd been working toward. This was what I'd been fighting for. It wasn't just about taking back what was mine. It was about giving him a taste of the same fear he had made me feel all these years. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Craig was still standing there, a defeated figure in the distance. The twist had come. Now it was time to deliver the final blow. The next few days passed in a blur, but the weight of the decisions I had made hung over me like a storm cloud. The pieces were all falling into place. Craig was cornered, and Sarah, well, she was the final piece I needed to set everything in motion. But as much as I was ready to watch their world crumble, I knew the fallout was going to be harder than I thought. I had everything. The hidden properties, the bank records, the secret deals. I could feel the power of it in my hands. The lawsuit was filed, the assets were frozen, and Craig's empire was on the verge of collapsing. But what would that mean for me, for my family? I had been so consumed with revenge, with getting back what was mine, that I hadn't stopped to think about the cost. The emotional cost, the cost to my family. I hadn't seen Sarah since the day I found the papers in the shed. She hadn't come to the house, hadn't called, nothing. But I knew she was watching. She had to be. She knew something was coming. I walked into the living room, my mind racing. When I saw the note, it was on the coffee table, next to the stack of papers I had been working through, a single sheet, folded neatly. My name was written on it in Sarah's familiar handwriting. I unfolded it, reading her words. It was short, almost too short to be real. Use one, Jerry. Everything Sep's falling apart, and it's Sep's my fault. I should have never let Craig get this far. I Sep sorry for everything. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Sarah was the one person I never expected to betray me. Craig? Sure, he was a liar, a thief. But Sarah, she was supposed to be the one person who had my back. The one person I trusted with everything. I sat down, the weight of the letter pulling me into the chair. The guilt, the anger, it all mixed together, and for a brief moment I didn't know what to feel. I had fought so hard to take everything back from Craig, to expose him for the fraud he was, but now it felt hollow. I tossed the letter aside, trying to push the emotions down. There was no time for this. I had come too far to let anything derail my plan. But then the phone rang. It was Ben. Jerry, he said, his voice low. We've got a problem. Craig Sep's lawyer. Sep's been making moves. Sep's trying to get the lawsuit dismissed. We need to hit back, fast. I stood up, my pulse quickening. What do you mean? We have the evidence. The bank records, the hidden properties, the contracts. They can set just make it disappear. They says they're good, Jerry, too good. We need to prepare for a battle. This isn't assessed gonna be easy. I hung up the phone and walked over to the window. The sky outside was darkening, clouds swirling together in a storm. It felt like a sign. Everything was about to change, the calm before the storm. I had fought for this. I had fought for my family, for my legacy, for the truth. But now the consequences were here. Craig wasn't going to go down without a fight, and as much as I wanted to enjoy the sweet taste of victory, I knew I couldn't stop. Not now. I grabbed the phone again and dialed Michael's number. He picked up on the second ring. Jerry, he said, his voice cautious. What's going on? They sent her fighting back, I said, frustration creeping into my voice. Craig Sepp's lawyer is trying to get the lawsuit thrown out. They know we Sepp got them. We need to do whatever it takes to make sure this doesn't set to fall apart. All right, Michael replied, his voice steady. I said'll get in touch with some people. We said'll handle this. Just don't do anything rash, Jerry. I knew Michael was trying to help, but it didn't feel like enough. I couldn't just sit around and wait. I had to act. The next morning I drove to the courthouse. I had to be there. I had to see it all for myself. The lawyer's motions, the counter-arguments, everything that was going to determine whether I won or lost this fight. When I walked into the courtroom, I saw Craig's lawyer already there, talking to a few people. The man was slick, dressed in a suit that screamed confidence, but I could see the cracks in his facade. Craig's world was falling apart. He was desperate. I sat in the back of the room, my eyes locked on Craig as he entered. He saw me immediately. There was no pretending now. He knew what I had. He knew I was going to take everything from him. The hearing started, and I sat there listening to the arguments being made. Craig's lawyer tried to downplay the evidence, claiming it was all circumstantial, but I knew what I had. The receipts, the bank transfers, the signed contracts. The lies were all unraveling, and then it happened. The twist I hadn't anticipated. Craig's lawyer stood up and presented a counterclaim. They had evidence that could completely reverse everything I had worked for. A new set of documents, contracts that I had never seen, showing that Sarah had been involved in the business dealings long before I went to prison. It was all part of Craig's plan. He had covered his tracks. He had used Sarah's name, her connections, to make everything look legitimate. They had been working together, and now the evidence was in front of everyone. My heart sank. This wasn't just a setback. This was a game changer. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. The battle was far from over. But I could feel it. Today was the day everything changed. My heart was pounding in my chest, each beat reminding me of everything I had lost, everything I had fought for. Craig sat across from me, his smug smile gone, replaced by an air of uncertainty. His lawyer had thrown a curveball, but I wasn't backing down. I had the truth, and the truth was a weapon stronger than any lie. The judge had just called for a recess. I stood up, my legs stiff from sitting so long. My mind was spinning, but I wasn't going to let the doubt creep in. Not now. I had to keep it together. I had to win for my family, for everything that had been stolen from me. I walked out of the courtroom, trying to clear my mind. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, the weight of it all pressing down, but I couldn't let it break me. Not now, not when I was so close. I grabbed my phone and dialed Ben's number. His voice answered immediately, steady and calm. Jerry, I need you to go over the latest documents again. I need to know everything about Sarah Sipp's involvement. I know you Sift already dug into it, but I need more. We can Sipston let this slip through the cracks. There was a pause on the other end. I set him on it. It back to you soon, Jerry. Thanks, Ben. I hung up, my eyes scanning the hallway outside the courtroom. I couldn't help but notice the whispers, the hushed voices. People were watching, waiting to see how this would play out. I could feel their eyes on me, judging me, but I didn't care. I was going to win this. Craig had destroyed my life for years, but now it was time for him to face the consequences. I walked back into the courtroom just as the judge returned, his gavel coming down with a sharp bang. The room fell silent. Every eye on us. Mr. Hall, the judge said, looking directly at me. It is your turn to present your case. We subheard the defense SEP's argument, and now it's SEP's time to hear yours. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every word I was about to say. This was my moment. This was everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed. I stepped forward, trying to steady my nerves. I'll be brief, Your Honor. I began, my voice steady but filled with the conviction that had been building inside me for days. My ex-business partner, Craig, and my ex-wife, Sarah, have tried to tear my life apart. They've taken everything from me, my family, my business, my name, and they did it through lies, deceit, and manipulation. I paused, letting my words hang in the air. For 5 years I sat in a prison cell for a crime I didn't commit. I lost my family. I lost my reputation, and I lost my legacy. But I never stopped fighting for the truth. And now I have the evidence, the documents, the proof that they've been stealing from me, stealing from our family for years. I turned to Craig and Sarah, my gaze hardening. Craig stole from me, from my business, and from my father's legacy. And Sarah betrayed me in the worst way possible. She helped him. She helped him take everything we built together. And for what? For money? For a life of luxury while I rotted away behind bars? I could see Sarah's face twitch, her eyes shifting nervously. But Craig, he sat there, unmoving, his eyes locked on mine. He wasn't going to flinch. Not yet. But I could feel the tension in him, the realization that his world was starting to crumble. I have the bank records, Your Honor, I continued, my voice growing more confident. I have the proof that Craig has been siphoning money from the business for years, and I have the property records that show he's been hiding assets. I also have documents proving that Sarah was complicit in this, signing contracts, moving money around, all while I was sitting in that prison cell, unaware of what they were doing. I turned back to the judge, letting the weight of the evidence settle in the room. This isn't said just about money, Your Honor. This is about justice. This is about the truth coming to light. Craig and Sarah have destroyed my life, and now they need to pay for it. I sat down, feeling the weight of my words. There was a moment of silence before the judge spoke again. Thank you, Mr. Hall, the judge said, his tone neutral. We will take a brief recess and reconvene shortly. The gavel came down, signaling the break. As the courtroom emptied, I sat back in my seat, my mind racing. I had done everything I could. Now it was in the hands of the judge. I had exposed the truth. I had laid it all out, and there was no turning back. As I walked out of the courtroom to get some air, I saw Craig standing near the doors talking to his lawyer. He looked up as I approached, his expression hardening. You think Youssef won, Jerry? Craig said, his voice low. This isn't Seb over. Youssef are not going to get away with this. I still have people who can make your life a living hell. I stood there staring at him. His words didn't faze me anymore. You step the one who steps going down, Craig. You step the one who steps going to pay for everything you stepped done, and no amount of money or threats will change that. I turned and walked away, not bothering to look back. The storm had passed. The battle was almost over. Craig had no more cards to play, and when the judge made his ruling, I would have my justice. The gavel came down with a sharp echo, and for a moment everything felt frozen in time. I had done it. I had walked into that courtroom, laid out the truth, and now, finally, it was over. The weight of everything. The years of prison, the betrayal, the endless nights wondering if I would ever get my life back, had all led to this moment. The Judge Sepp's voice was calm, but I heard the finality in it. In light of the evidence presented, I rule in favor of Mr. Hall. The defendants, Craig and Sarah, are hereby found guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. All assets seized from Mr. Hall are to be returned to him immediately. I barely heard the rest of the words. My heart was racing, the adrenaline surging through my veins. Craig's face had gone ashen, his smug expression evaporating like a cloud in a storm. Sarah? She didn't look at me. She didn't dare. The room was buzzing, people talking in hushed tones, but it all felt distant, muffled. I was standing at the edge of something monumental, something I hadn't allowed myself to think about until this moment. Justice, real justice. Not the kind of justice I'd been dreaming about in my head. This was the kind of justice that was undeniable, the kind that made people like Craig and Sarah face the consequences of their actions. I stood up slowly as the courtroom emptied. The weight in my chest was lifting, but it wasn't replaced with relief. It was replaced with something else, something I hadn't expected. Peace. A quiet understanding that I had done what I needed to do, but that the fight had changed me in ways I wasn't sure I was ready for. I walked out of the courthouse, the sun blinding me as I stepped into the street. My steps were slow, deliberate. I couldn't rush this moment. I'd spent too many years waiting for something, anything, to feel like it was over, and now it was, but not in the way I thought. I was free. Free from the lies, the prison, the betrayal, but freedom felt different than I imagined. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the beginning of something else. I walked toward the car, my mind already drifting to what came next. The workshop, the house, the business, everything that had been taken from me. I had won back the physical things, but it wasn't the things that haunted me. It was the people. It was Sarah, my wife who once stood by me, the mother of my children, the one person I never thought would betray me. How do you forgive someone who's done that? I didn't have an answer. Maybe I never would. As I reached my car, I pulled out my phone and checked the messages. There were dozens, most of them from Michael, Ben, and a few people from the business. They were all congratulating me, telling me how proud they were. I didn't feel proud, not yet, not when so much had been lost, not when there was so much damage to heal. But as I sat in the car, staring at the screen, I saw something that made my heart stop. A message from Sarah. Just one line. I'm sorry for everything, Jerry. I was wrong. I hope one day you can forgive me. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. Sorry, that word meant nothing now. It didn't change the fact that she'd destroyed everything we had. It didn't change the fact that she had been a part of Craig's betrayal. But even as my anger flared up again, I realized something else. Forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. I couldn't hold on to this forever. I couldn't let this anger eat me up inside. I had to let go. But could I? Would I ever be able to forgive her? I didn't know. But what I did know was this. I had to move on, for myself, for my family, for the future I was going to build. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and started the car. The road ahead was uncertain, and I didn't know where it would take me, but I knew one thing: I had my life back. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't the way I thought it would be, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow across the horizon. It felt like a sign. The end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As I drove away from the courthouse, I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd regained. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about the house, or the cars, or the workshop. It was about something deeper. Something I hadn't realized until now. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. And in some strange, quiet way, it was about redemption. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. And now I'm taking back what's mine.